Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
We are approaching Easter on April the 15th in the year 2022, and today we finish the first 5 books of Moses. Let's look at chapter 33 and verse 1. This is the blessing with which Moses, the man of God, blessed the people of Israel before his death. So previously we saw Moses' song, and here we see Moses' blessing. But notice what happens at verse 3. I want you to see this. At verse 3, we have the love of God for his people, or the love of God for his own people, is at the heart of all of God's acts. Look at verse 3. Yes, he loved his people. So in other words, we have this confidence that comes right from Deuteronomy that we are the people that the Lord has set his affection upon. As David Crowder says in one of the songs that he made popular, yes, indeed, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Look at verse 5, and this is going to become an important verse, especially as it relates to us remembering and finding sort of our place in the narrative of the conquest. There may be some things that are coming in Joshua that sort of rub our senses a bit, where we have these declarations of war, where we see God going to war with the Canaanites and all the other rest of the inhabitants of the land. But we need to remember that this is not prescriptive, this is descriptive, and part of that description involves this fact of verse 5. Thus the Lord became king in Jeshurun. So in other words, Israel is a theocracy. God is their king, and he gave them these special instructions on how to execute his ways in the land. And here's what we can be assured of. He has his way, he has his reasons for doing what he did. Our place is simply to trust him. We don't have to duplicate that. And I know in times history and Christian history in particular, there have been those who have looked at holy war and said this is the way. Well, this was the way back in Joshua, but we're not in the days of Joshua anymore. We're in the days of Jesus. And Jesus, of course, gives us a hint of days that are coming. And but that's, again, us trusting in his ways and following what he has said. What has he said now? He has said, go and preach the gospel. And so remember that as we're reading these passages. But let's turn to Deuteronomy here, and let's look at verse 26, 27, 28, and 29. There is none like God, O Jeshurun, who rides through the heavens to your help, through the skies in his majesty. The eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And he thrust out the enemy before you and said, destroy. So Israel lived in safety. Jacob lived alone in a land of grain and wine, whose heavens drop down dew. Happy are you, O Israel, who is like you. Look at this language. A people saved by the Lord. The shield of your help, the sword of your triumph. Your enemies shall come fawning to you, and you shall tread upon their backs. And so then we have in verse 5 of Deuteronomy 34, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab opposite Beth Peor. But, this is an interesting fact, no one knows the place of his burial even to this day. And of course, look at verse 7. Moses was 120 years old, which again is a reference back to Genesis chapter 6, where God said that my spirit will not strive with man always, but his years will be 120 years. And so Moses lived the full allotment of his life, and look at how the Bible describes him. His eyes were undimmed, and his vigor unabated. We're going to see this later when we encounter Joshua. When Joshua gets old, he still has work to do. And here Moses is dead, and there's still work to be done. Now we're going to see Moses come up again. We're going to see him at another mountain, and this time we'll see him at the Mount of Transfiguration. And look at this language here in verse 10. And there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. And when we see Moses again at the Mount of Transfiguration, he's going to be staring again into the face of God as we see Jesus Christ transfigured on the mountain. And so there's not arisen a prophet like Moses, but Deuteronomy 18 has already let us know that there is coming a prophet like Moses. But this time, instead of knowing God face to face, this prophet will himself be the face of God. And of course, we're talking about Jesus our Lord. And so that takes us into Luke chapter 23. And remember, we're continuing to approach Easter, but I want you to notice this about the crucifixion. It's set in eschatological terms. You say, well, what does that mean? Eschatology is the study of the last things or the end of days. And Jesus puts his crucifixion in the tones of the last days. Look at what he says in verse 29. For behold, the days are coming. And so this event, as significant as it is an end time event. We're going to see the heavens being torn down. We're going to see new creation coming out of the tomb on 3 days. So this is an end time event that again points towards the end of days when the King is going to make the world his dwelling place forever. Now let's focus on the thieves just for a moment, or let's go back to verse 34. These thieves that are here, one on his right, one on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And then let's focus on the thieves. Look at verse 40. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation, and we indeed justly? For we are receiving the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said to him, Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. This Jesus that we serve is a Jesus who can give us a guarantee that we will be in paradise with him forever. And in light of the thieves, let's close our reading today by looking over at Proverbs 14, 9 and 10. Fools mock at the guilt offering, but the upright enjoy acceptance. The upright enjoys acceptance. And this is the acceptance that we have in Jesus, the guarantee that where he is, there we may be also.